Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Horror Stories. I know many of you use these episodes to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the episodes. Story 1. It was late September of last year, and work had started to slow down for me. I've been driving taxis in Jersey City for almost 5 years, most of the time picking up passengers heading to the airport at dawn, or people leaving bars downtown on the weekends. I usually work mainly with Uber and Lyft because they're safer, but every now and then I still accept direct calls from a few regular clients who prefer to pay in cash. One night around 11 p.m., I received a call from an unknown number. The man introduced himself as a friend of one of my regular clients, Carlos. He asked if I could pick him up at an apartment building on Kennedy Boulevard. Cash only, no apps involved. Normally, I don't accept strangers, but when he mentioned Carlos, it sounded convincing. Besides, rent was coming due soon, so I accepted. He gave me the address, an old building I vaguely remembered, near Journal Square. When I pulled up to the curb, I texted him. He immediately replied, telling me to drive around to the back alley entrance because he had something heavy to load. The alley was narrow, barely lit by a flickering bulb above a rusty metal door. I parked without turning off the engine. Out of the shadows, the man appeared. He was average height, dressed simply in a black jacket, jeans and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He motioned for me to roll down the window. I did, and he leaned in, speaking in a low voice. "Hey buddy, can you give me a quick hand? I need to bring out a bag from the basement. It's a bit heavy." Something about it felt off. I'd been asked for help before with luggage or grocery bags, but going into a basement was different. Still, I figured maybe he genuinely needed help. Hesitant, I turned off the engine, got out of the car, and followed him to the door. He unlocked it with a key and pushed it open. Inside was a narrow hallway, damp and smelling of mold. He flicked a switch and a single bulb lit the stairs going down. I hesitated again, but he was already halfway down, urging me to follow. The further we went, the colder and more uncomfortable I felt. At the bottom, he opened another door leading into a dark basement with a concrete floor and pipes across the ceiling. It looked abandoned and filthy, filled with junk. On a table under a dim lamp sat a large black duffel bag. Even from a distance, it looked bulky. Without saying much, he grabbed one handle and motioned for me to take the other. When I reached out, I saw something that froze me in place, a dark red stain seeping from the bottom corner of the bag. My stomach tightened. I pulled my hand back immediately and, trying to stay calm, asked, "What's inside that bag?" He looked at me in silence, expressionless for a few seconds, then muttered, "Sorry, I can't tell you." My instinct screamed that something was horribly wrong. The weight, the stain. It looked like blood. Suddenly, the bag seemed big enough to hold a person. Panic hit me hard. I stepped back instinctively, my heart pounding. "I'm not touching that." "Sorry, but this is way too weird," I said. He seemed surprised at my reaction and quickly replied, "Wait, I'll pay you double. Just help me load it and drive." The fact that he suddenly offered more money only confirmed to me that something sinister was going on. I shook my head and turned toward the stairs, muttering an excuse about having to leave. I rushed up without looking back, feeling his eyes burning into me the whole way. I reached the taxi with trembling hands, got in and locked the doors. From the basement entrance, he stood watching me as I backed out of the alley and pulled back onto the avenue. My heart pounded as I drove away. A few blocks later, I pulled into the bright lights of a 24-hour store parking lot, adrenaline still flooding through me. Sitting there with shaking hands, I couldn't stop thinking about that bag. I was certain something terrible was inside. Finally, I took a deep breath and dialed 911, recounting everything that had happened. Minutes later, patrol cars sped past with sirens off, but lights flashing, heading toward the building. I waited anxiously, torn between guilt for leaving and relief for trusting my gut. Half an hour later, an officer called my phone asking me to return to give a statement. When I went back, the entire street was taped off. Police were moving around, radios crackling with urgent voices. A detective approached me asking questions about the man, the bag, the basement, everything. At last, he explained what they had found. Inside the bag was the body of a young woman, the man's wife. They had gotten into a violent argument, and he had struck her in the head with a garage tool, killing her instantly. He had planned to bury her somewhere remote and use me and my taxi to get her out of the city. My legs nearly gave out hearing that. The detective patted me on the shoulder and said I was lucky to have trusted my instincts. He told me things could have ended much worse for me if I had stayed or asked too many questions. Those words stuck with me, echoing over and over in my mind as I finally drove home, still trembling at the wheel. I never heard from Carlos again. He never called me, and I never found out if he even knew what his friend had planned. Before moving on to the next story, if this is your first time on our channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you won't miss our upcoming horror stories. Story 2. A few months ago, my life followed such a strict rhythm that it felt almost automatic. 5 days a week, the same routine repeated without change. I would finish my afternoon shift at a small insurance call center on Broad Street, shut down the computer, and leave the building along with the wave of other agents. The RTR ride took me from Manhattan to Astoria in about 20 minutes. That part of the trip was my favorite. Inside the car, I could lean back, close my eyes, and let the rocking of the train relax me after 8 hours of polite voices and policy numbers. By 9:15, I was usually stepping out of the 30th Street station and walking toward my apartment. I lived on the top floor of a 3-story building with a landlord who always kept the hallways smelling of fresh paint. It was a simple, repetitive, stable life, and I felt comfortable in it. But one Thursday in early March, that routine cracked. The snow had melted just a week before, and the sidewalks were still lined with gray piles of ice. I left work at my usual hour, grabbed my coat, and was on my way to the subway when I remembered I was out of dish soap and bread. Since there was a market open late in my neighborhood, I decided to stop by after getting back to Queens. It seemed insignificant, just a tiny adjustment in my schedule. The market sat on the corner of 31st Street and Newtown Road. The fluorescent lights cast a cold glow on the sidewalk. I pushed the door open, grabbed a basket, and walked through the familiar aisles. Halfway through, in the canned goods section, I heard someone call me by name. Under that white light, with music playing from the speakers, it took me a second to recognize the voice. It was Rachel, a girl I'd been very close to in high school in Brooklyn. After graduation, we had drifted apart. She was holding a bag of rice and smiling as if she had been waiting to run into me. The surprise was pleasant, and within minutes we were catching up right there in the aisle. After chatting for a bit, she suggested we grab dinner at the 24-hour diner across the avenue. My groceries could wait. The chance to reconnect with an old friend seemed too good to pass up. The diner's metal sign buzzed above the door. Inside, a row of empty stools lined the counter, and the only customers were a couple sharing coffee in the corner. Rachel and I sat at a table by the window. We ordered fries and milkshakes, talking about ordinary things. Work, rent, her plans to enroll at LaGuardia Community College. Time blurred. I glanced at my phone once, saw it was nearly 11, and told myself I'd leave after finishing my milkshake. But the conversation flowed so easily, relaxed and spontaneous, that we kept talking until the street outside was deserted under the lamplight. At midnight, I stood, buttoned my coat, and said I had to wake up early. Rachel offered to order me a ride through an app, but I declined. My apartment was only a straight 20-minute walk away. The air outside carried that biting late winter chill, but the sky was clear and calm. I felt awake enough and safe enough to walk. The first blocks were quiet except for the distant rumble of an elevated train. The shop's metal shutters were pulled down, graffiti gleaming under the orange glow of the streetlights. I passed a laundromat, then a closed bar. Halfway down 30th Street, I realized there were footsteps that weren't mine. They came in short bursts and stopped when I stopped. I looked back and saw a man half a block away. His hood was up, head down. Maybe coincidence, but my instincts tightened. I turned onto a residential street with identical brick houses. He turned too. I quickened my pace. The soles of my sneakers squeaked against the damp pavement. 3 houses ahead, a motion sensor flicked on a porch light, casting a beam across the sidewalk. I wanted to run, but thought doing so would erase any appearance of coincidence. Instead, I turned at the next corner, left then immediately right into a narrower alley. My neighborhood was a crooked grid, and I knew those side streets well. He should have been lost there. Yet the footsteps returned. Closer now, shorter, almost eager. Panic is deafening inside the mind. It makes every shadow seem alive. I remembered the advice I used to give clients at work. Stay calm, observe details, look for help. 2 blocks ahead, a yellow cab was idling outside a building. The driver leaned against the door, scrolling on his phone. When I reached him, I asked if he was free. He nodded. I asked him to take me. He opened the trunk for my small grocery bag, but I kept it with me on my lap. As soon as I shut the door, he pulled away. Relief washed over me, enough that my hands trembled as I tried to text Rachel. Almost home. She replied with a thumbs-up emoji. The cab turned left at the next light. I blinked, confused. Left was the wrong way. To reach my street, we should have gone straight for at least 3 more intersections. I leaned forward, politely telling him he had taken the wrong route. He said something about a shortcut, that construction was blocking the usual road. His voice was flat, too controlled, without an accent. My stomach dropped. We drove under the elevated tracks and stopped beside a dark stretch of sidewalk with broken streetlights. I pulled out my phone to check the map, already sensing we had circled back near where it all began. Before I could say anything, the passenger door opened. The hooded man got in. Under the interior light, I saw his face. Young, clean-shaven, eyes gleaming with intent. He turned toward me and smiled like we shared a secret. My first instinct was to lock my door, but it was already locked. The driver raised a hand, palm facing me, signaling for silence. The car accelerated. The hooded man pulled a small battered pistol from his pocket, scratches across the barrel. He pointed it at my knees, speaking in a low, rehearsed voice. Phone, money, jewelry. He told me to put everything into the grocery bag. With a dry throat, I handed over my wallet, my phone, and a necklace my sister had given me for my last birthday. He ordered me to keep my eyes down. The car swerved sharply, tires squealing. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to breathe steadily. The man said they would drop me near the river when they were done. His partner laughed. I imagined the dark trails by the water, far from any house. I imagined the headlines the next day. Suddenly, red and blue lights flooded the taxi's interior. A patrol car was behind us, siren off but lights flashing. For an instant, no one moved. Then the driver cursed under his breath and hit the brake. The loudspeaker ordered us to pull over. He slowed toward the curb, looked at his partner, then stomped the gas. The force slammed me against the seat. The hooded man swung around with the gun raised, but the lights tracked every move. I yanked the handle, praying the child lock wasn't on. A click. The door opened, wind roaring as I hurled myself onto the asphalt. I landed on my side, rolled and scrambled up, running toward the patrol car, waving my arms. An officer got out and met me halfway, asking if I was hurt. With a shaky voice, I spilled everything that had happened. The other officer tore off after the cab, tires screaming. The one helping me led me to the front seat of the patrol car, shut the door, and called for medical assistance. My palms were scraped, my coat sleeve torn, but nothing broken. At the station, under fluorescent lights, I gave my statement. They logged my belongings as stolen, offered to call a family member, and finally drove me home at 3 a.m. 2 days passed. I called in sick to the call center and kept the TV off. Every noise outside made me tense. On Sunday afternoon, someone buzzed the intercom. It was Detective Reyes, the same officer who had taken my statement. He stood in the hall with a sealed evidence bag containing my wallet, phone, and necklace. He explained that the suspects had lost control during the chase, crashed into a tree on Hoy Avenue, and tried to flee on foot. The passenger broke his ankle. Both were in custody, facing charges of armed robbery and kidnapping. I thanked him and signed the release form. Before leaving, he paused and mentioned that speeding was the only reason the patrol had noticed them at all. They had been clocked doing 42 in a 25 zone. A simple traffic violation had exposed the entire plan. When he left, I put the necklace back on. It felt heavier than before, as if each link carried the memory of that night. I still walk home after work, but now I vary the route. I no longer turn down friends' offers for a ride. The city is the same, but its edges have grown sharper. Some nights, when a car lingers too long at the curb, the memory returns crystal clear. The image of a hooded figure climbing into a taxi and closing the door. Story 3. I always thought summer would lift my luck, but June of last year proved me wrong. I had been job hunting since spring, sending resume after resume, sitting in reception areas that smelled like air freshener and stale coffee, only to be told in the end that there was someone more suitable. By the time the days turned long and stifling, my savings were gone. My parents, both in their 70s, depended on me for rent and medication. At night, I lay awake, sweating in my small room, counting the coins in my purse and listening to the hum of the floor fan. In the end, I told my friend Kira what was happening. We met her in a small park by the canal near Limehouse. The sun was so bright it made me squint, and the benches were scorching to the touch. Kira listened in silence, brushed a lock of hair from her cheek, and handed me the keys to her silver Toyota. "Use the car," she said. "Sign up as a rideshare driver for a while. Nights are busy and tips are better." I hesitated. I had never driven strangers before, but my pockets were empty and the rent notice on the fridge seemed to grow larger every day. I signed up that very night. I was approved in 3 days after the background check and a quick photo of my license. I vacuumed the car, filled the tank with what little I had left, and placed a small bottle of hand gel in the cup holder to look professional. My first shift started on a Friday right after sunset, when the sky was still pink over the city. The heat clung to the asphalt, shimmering in soft waves that distorted the headlights. I put on a light cotton blouse and tied my hair back to clear my neck. The Toyota's air conditioning fought the muggy air but never quite won. The first rides were simple, a pair of tourists from Covent Garden to a hostel by the river, 2 friends from Brixton heading to a club in Soho, laughing about exes and sharing a bottle of water, a chef in uniform smelling of grilled onions from King's Cross to his flat in Hackney. Every ping on the phone was a relief. £4 here, £9 there. Small pieces of security. Near midnight, the app pinged again. Pickup, Royal London Hospital, Whitechapel. Destination, Willesden Green. More distance meant more pay, so I accepted. I took a sip from my bottle and drove along the broad avenue flanked by late-night kebab shops and old brick buildings glowing under the streetlights. The hospital entrance was busy even at that hour. A few nurses in pastel scrubs joked outside. 2 ambulances idled with their engines running. My passenger came out through the glass doors. A tall man, gray sweatpants, hood up despite the heat, surgical mask covering half his face. He had a small white pharmacy bag hanging from his wrist. Without a word, he opened the back door and slid in. I greeted him and asked if he was comfortable. He nodded but kept his eyes on the window. The map showed 45 minutes across the city. I merged into traffic, windows up and the AC on low. We rode in silence through Aldgate and then along Commercial Street where soft neon spilled from late bars. At a red light, he leaned forward. His voice sounded dry, almost tired. "Can you turn left up ahead?" I don't feel like the main avenue. Too many cameras. The request pricked a worry in my stomach. The direct route was faster and any driver knew it. Still, the customer chooses. I nodded and turned, taking a quieter street where old warehouses turned their backs to the road. 3 blocks later, he spoke again. "Cancel the ride." The tone was flat, not angry, just an instruction. "Sorry." I tried to keep my voice from shaking. "End the trip on the phone." His breath brushed the back of my neck through the seat gap. I felt warm metal rest on my shoulder. I glanced sideways, the faint reflection of a blade, a knife. My thumb trembled as I opened the app. 1 tap and the screen went blank. The company would no longer track our location. Sweat ran along my hairline. "Now pass me the phone," he said. I handed it back without turning around. He slipped it into his pocket. The streetlights flickered, leaving pools of light across the dashboard. The AC suddenly felt icy against my damp skin. He shifted closer, his knee pressing into the seat back. "Open the glove box," he ordered. I obeyed. He rummaged inside and found the cheap backup phone and a folded 10-pound note for emergencies. He took both. "Stop there," he said, pointing to a narrow alley that smelled of hot garbage and spilled beer. The headlights made the broken glass on the ground sparkle. We stopped, engine idling, the fan blowing warm air again. He leaned forward, bringing the knife closer. "Unlock the banking app." My fingers shook. Wrong passcode. Loud breaths. Second try. Correct. The balance, £2.63. No pending deposits. No overdraft. Almost nothing. He stared for a long moment. Somewhere in the alley, an insect thuddered against the window with a dry buzz. Finally, he let out a short exhale that might have been a laugh. "Driving all night for £2. "I've been taking care of my parents," I said. My throat felt raw. He leaned back. The knife tip dropped to rest near his knee. For a heartbeat, we were wrapped in a thick silence. Farther in, a bottle rolled and clinked along the concrete. The man reached into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out a folded green bill. $100. He tossed it onto the passenger seat. "Take it," he said. "Fill the tank. Feed your folks. And wait 5 minutes after I leave before you move." I didn't touch the bill at first. My eyes moved between the money and the knife. He caught the look, slid the blade into his sleeve, and opened the door. A gust of warm air came in, smelling of onions frying somewhere in the distance. He got out, closed the door gently, and walked toward the mouth of the alley. I hit the lock, my hands vibrating on the wheel. The dashboard clock ticked slowly. I counted breaths, 1, 2, 3, until 300 seconds dragged by and passed. Then I put it in gear and eased back to the avenue, headlights sliding over damp brick. On the way to Limehouse, I stopped at a 24-hour petrol station. The fluorescents buzzed overhead. I fed the crisp $100 bill to the cashier, who held it up to the light, shrugged, and gave me change in pounds. I filled the tank until the nozzle clicked, feeling each liter as hope and worry at once. When I reached Kira's flat, the first birds were chirping and the sky over the canal was turning a soft blue-gray. The summer air already felt warm. Inside, I left the change on her coffee table and curled up on the sofa, shoes still on, listening as my pulse slowed. The next morning, I didn't tell my parents anything. I made them tea, smiled, and paid the rent in cash that same afternoon. The rest went to their medicine and groceries. I kept driving, but only along main avenues now, rejecting pickups that felt off. My life is still a string of rides and long nights. But sometimes when the sun peeks over the city, I feel the weight of that green bill in my memory. Dense, strange, impossible to forget.